Hello? Okay. Alright. I fucking love Pokemon so much. And I'm gonna do another one of these fucking video journal things about Pokemon. It's not video, it's an audio file. Doesn't matter. This is not safe. I'm driving. No, I'm not driving while I'm on my phone. Like, it's in my lap. I'm talking. I'm just... Traffic. It's a weird situation. Anyway. Fucking Pokemon. It's great. I have 4 teams. Nah, that's not what I want to talk about today. Well... See, last time I talked to you guys about Sableye. Sableye is fucking great. I love Sableye. That was in doubles, though. Primarily, I play singles. And I've always wanted to do this thing where I basically just give someone a tutorial on how to play Pokemon, because that's just something I just know how to do. Like, it's like fucking breathing for me. Like, I can just do that. I'd imagine that's what it's like for people who, like, can play an instrument and, like, have been doing it since they were, like, a child or a young teenager. I'd imagine that's what it's like for them. Like, they can just do it. And it's like, yeah, you could get better at it. But it's like, it's not something you have to think about. Like, that's what playing Pokemon is like for me. Like, I can just look at a team and just be like, you know, I don't necessarily know, like, everything about the team immediately. But, like, if I'm going into a game and I see that a team's got, like Heatran, Landorus, and, like, whatever else, I'll be like, okay, that Heatran, it could have Choice Scarf with Lava Plume or Magma Storm, maybe both. It might be running Leftovers, could be running Air Balloon. Probably got it. If it has either of those, it's probably running Toxic or Stealth Rock. Flash Cannon is not out of the question, but not super common. Like I can just know, like, all the information one could reasonably have immediately. Anyway, I have this little Word document. It's not a long document. It's basically just links to a site that you can use to, like, upload teams you've made. And I call it my Hall of Fame because it's the 4 teams I've made that got to above 1500 ELO, which, if you don't know what ELO is, it was originally used to rank chess players, but it's also used, like Pokemon uses the same system. Basically, it's you start with 1000 ELO. Every time you battle someone, you lose a certain amount if you lose, and you gain a certain amount if you win. And the amount that you gain or lose is dependent on, like, the ELO of the person you battled compared to yours. So, for example, if you had 1000 ELO and you battled someone with 1200 ELO, if you won, you would gain, like, 25 or some shit. If you lose, though, you would only lose, like, 5 or 6. Whereas if you had 1200 and you lost to someone who had 1000, you would lose, like, 25. It's sort of like, I guess it's sort of like you lose however much your opponent gains, and then it's sort of like that. And the site I played on, Pokemon Showdown, the system it used would be, I mean, the same as chess.com, basically. It matches you up against someone who has a similar ELO to you. Anyway, there's been a lot of debate on that site that I've been a part of over the difference between high tier, mid tier, and low tier. Like what ELOs are considered low tier, what ELOs are considered mid tier, and what ELOs are considered high tier. My personal take on the matter, and this is by no means objective, although I do feel it is correct. You're free to disagree with me. My personal take: the site doesn't let you go below 1000. You start with 1000. If you lose at 1000, you just stay at 1000. So 1000 to 1500 is low tier. Then anything from 1500 to the top 500 players, which it ranks in a separate system. Like this, the site lets you see if you're in the top 500 of all players. I would consider anyone who's between 1500 ELO and the top 500 players to be a mid-tier player. And then top 500 is high tier. The hardest fucking part is not like, if you're in high tier, because I've played in high tiers. I played in high tiers briefly in singles, but I played in high tiers. I played in high tiers in doubles, and like, it was honestly easier than playing in like anywhere from like 1300 to 1600 ELO, because anywhere from like 1300 to 1600, it's your opponent's a fucking wild card. Like, so the thing is, like, here's the problem. Say I'm running like, say like I'm running Breloom. Okay, Breloom's like classic move is Spore. Also, it has Technician, and it frequently runs Mach Punch. So, if I'm in like 1300 to 1600, my opponent, and say my opponent has in, I don't know, like Toxapex. Oh fuck, I gotta get gas. I'll get it. Toxapex. But they have Landorus in the back. Like, they could switch to Landorus. If they're a like smart, competent player, then their best move would probably be to go to Ferrothorn, since I could Spore them, and Ferrothorn's immune to Spore. And yeah, they'd eat. But I also have Mach Punch, and they don't want to eat a Mach Punch. So the thing is, like, I can get a read. I got really good at this. I got really good at like being able to get a read on my opponents and be able to like predict what they're gonna do. But that's only if I know how much. That's only if I know. Like, I can get a read on like what choices they would make. But if I don't know what information they're making those choices with, then it's impossible. So for example, like, if they know, if they expect me to predict, if they're like really good, they might expect me to predict the switch to Ferrothorn and stay Pex. So it's like this weird mind game where I could also set where like we're trying to outpredict each other. But if they're an idiot, then their thought process is completely different, which makes it impossible for me to predict them unless I know they're an idiot and I can play around that. And like in the low tiers, you kind of know people are dumb. So like in the low tiers, if I was doing that, I would be like, okay, I'll just Spore because I know he's not going to switch to Ferrothorn because he doesn't even know I have Spore probably. And in the high tiers, it would be that weird prediction thing where I'd have to get a read on their personality and like figure out what they're going to do. But in the mid tiers, there's just no way. It's just pick one and it's a 50-50. And there's no way you can improve those odds because you don't know. You don't know how good your opponent is, so it's impossible to predict what they're going to do. Because if they're not very good, they might make like weird choices that you wouldn't expect, being used to playing people that are better than they are. But if you go in anticipating that and then they actually are really good, then they just successfully predicted you. Anyway, that's just, I don't know how to fix it. Pokemon does have a lot of problems. Like, and everyone will tell you that. Like, the fandom sucks. Okay, there's too much RNG for it to be like a real strategy game, even though it is. Like, it is a real strategy game that's like very complex and very deep and has like tens of thousands of people very invested in it. But at the same time, it's like you can just miss a 90% move 3 times in a row and lose a game that there should have been like no way you lost. And like that shit happens like a lot. I ran a Sun team. One of my 4 Hall of Fame teams. Like I said, the Hall of Fame is that Word document I have that like lists all my teams. I got 4 teams on there. The most recent one that I ran, when was that? It was a while ago. That was like August of last year. So that was like a year ago. Somewhere around, I don't remember. It was like semi-recent, but like not recent. Anyway, I ran a Sun team, which was fun. I like Sun teams. I had tried to run a Sun team a lot prior to that, and it just never really worked out. Well, the thing was, like, I would run a Sun team, and I was like, okay, well, what do you put on a Sun team? Like, you want, like, Sunsetter, obviously, Venusaur, obviously. Okay, I guess people listening to this might be muggles, so I'll explain. Basically, well, I'm gonna go get dinner. I'll explain what a Sun team is after. All right, so basically, like, in Pokemon, there's this thing called weather. And the way it works, well, there's 4 weathers: sun, sand, hail, and rain. They all work a little bit differently, but basically the way that they work is you can summon them either with a move or by a few Pokemon's abilities. Like there's a couple Pokemon for each weather that have an ability that lets them call the weather. And then the weather's there for 5 turns, or it can be extended to 8 turns if your Pokemon's holding an item. And basically, as long as the weather's in effect, it just has a variety of effects on all Pokemon on the field, both yours and your opponents. So, I could explain what all the weathers do, but that's kind of complicated. The one that's relevant is Sun. What Sun does is it increases the damage of Fire-type moves. It doubles them. Fire-type moves deal double damage. And it also cuts the damage of Water-type moves, which are super effective against Fire-types, by 50%. So Water-type moves do half damage, and Fire-type moves deal double damage. Which means you can, if you run Sun, it behooves you to run a bunch of Fire-type Pokemon. There's also, however, there's a lot of support, what I'm going to call it, for weather strategies. Basically what that means is, like, Pokemon that have abilities or moves that are, like, very strong but only work in weather. Like, for example, there's Weather Ball, which... Okay, well, I'll get to that in a second. The most important thing for Sun is this ability called Chlorophyll. And what Chlorophyll does is it doubles your Pokemon's speed when you're in Sun. I'm going to assume you have a basic knowledge of how Pokemon plays, and you understand that a Pokemon with higher speed moves first. So that's very strong, being able to double your speed as long as Sun is active. And Venusaur has Chlorophyll. It also has a move called Weather Ball. And what Weather Ball does is it changes type based on whatever weather is active. And if there's no and it does 100 damage unless there's no weather, then it does 50. But like under Sun, Weather Ball is a 100 damage fire type attack. Which Venusaur doesn't have any fire type attacks, but since it has Weather Ball, that allows it to beat things like Ferrothorn or other steel types, which is very strong. Plus it's 100 base damage, and it's fire type, so it gets powered up by Sun, so it actually does 200 damage. And then, plus Venusaur has Chlorophyll, so it's twice as fast, and then Venusaur could also run Solar Beam, although I wasn't. Solar Beam is a move that, it's a 120 damage grass move, which is good for Venusaur, since Venusaur is a grass type. But the downside is, you have to charge it for a turn, and then it uses on the next turn. But if Sun is active, it doesn't have to charge. It just uses it instantly. And 120 damage is just a lot. Like, standard damage in Pokemon is like 80 or 90 for moves. And anything over 100 is considered high. So 120 is a lot. And then plus it's a stab attack. That just means it's the same type as Venusaur. So it gets a 50% power boost. So yeah, Venusaur is really good in Sun. Like, to the point where Venusaur is basically the face of Sun. Like any Sun team you're running is going to have a Sunsetter, which is just a Pokemon that is capable of calling Sun, either through its ability or through a move. Usually the ability, because if a Pokemon has to call Sun through a move, then that means it has to switch in and then use the move, which means it actually takes 2 turns, and it wastes one of those. Which means it takes 2 turns to do it, and it has to waste a turn calling Sun, which also technically means Sun doesn't last as long, because that turn still counts as one of the 5 or 8 turns you have of Sun. So it's way more efficient to use a Pokemon that has an ability that calls Sun. There are only 3 of them. Ninetales, Torkoal, and Groudon. Groudon is banned to Ubers, which is just... Ubers, like, basically, there's various tiers in Pokemon. What's considered the standard, quote-unquote, tier is OU. It stands for overused. And Ubers is basically just all of the Pokemon that are banned from OU are legal there. So you can't use Groudon. So basically it was Ninetales or Torkoal. And I picked Torkoal because... Okay, I actually didn't get dinner. I could just go on and on and on and on and on about this team. And I will. Like, this is probably going to be like an hour long of just analyzing just every little fucking detail of just this one team I made. Because, I mean, that's what I did. And I love... These teams are like art for me. Like, they're not my art. Like this isn't like the greatest art I'll ever create. Like, I wrote Seaman. It's this fucking show I wrote. Everyone I've showed it to has said it's great, but I haven't done anything with it. It's a script. I have a script for it, and everyone I've showed it to liked it, but I'm having trouble, like, finding people to play the characters, or, like, scheduling with everything. You know, people are busy. So I haven't actually been able to film it yet. I don't know. Maybe they're being nice. I hope not. I think it's good. And I hope they're not just being... I hope they really do think it's good. So, like, that's my actual art. But, like, I consider making these teams, like, a form of art. Because it's, like... You know, they're, like, lovingly crafted over the course of, like, hours and hours and hours. And then, like... just through battle after battle after battle after dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of battles, they're just refined and honed they're just refined and, like, fine-tuned, and just, like, every fucking individual point, like, every fucking individual number, every move, every change that could be made is just super hyper-optimized into, like, just the best team it could possibly be. And because of that, because I put so much into it, I could just go on and on and on about, like, every little fucking detail. Like, a lot of people, they just use, like, metagame sets. Okay, I will talk about all of this later. Right now, I gotta go eat.